Thanks for coming back for an afternoon session on the power of artificial intelligence for storytelling. I think that's just the easiest way to describe it because uh, really where I want to go today is how can AI assist you in telling stories? Now, what do I mean by telling stories? Storytelling to me is not just exclusively gathering around a campfire and telling wonderful tales or your best road trip stories. Storytelling to me is all sorts of communication. It could be a pitch or a presentation, or you have this really great idea, and you can't necessarily just sit down and say, okay, let me crank out a 5-page paper with half-inch margins and black text on white paper and hand it over and have it have the same punch or impact as where maybe some video, maybe some podcast content, maybe some infographics, some long format HTML, uh, any number of multimodal communication will have a much bigger play when you're trying to reach out to that board of directors, angel investor, colleagues, fellow students to say, I have this great idea. Let me tell you all about it. That's storytelling. It's any type of communication to single or multiple audiences. And I find that AI can really help get that idea out of your head. And I hear this all the time. People say, I can't draw a straight line. How am I expected to take this wonderful vision that I see in my head and communicate it? AI. To me, AI is kind of the next iteration of creative tools. And I do mean that as a tool. It is the human hand that is wielding this AI. And I feed this AI a prompt, a series of text instructions to say, please make this. So I'm already controlling the AI by saying, this is what I want you to do. But then I can further edit, adapt, and alter and change the outcomes of what that prompt provided me. So that's where I'm coming from when I talk about artificial intelligence. It's not going to replace the human. It's a new tool the human's going to hold. So we've very much evolved from hammer and chisel to, in fact, cave paintings on the wall. And this is kind of where I'm going to start this conversation. Everybody's looking at this image right now, hopefully. And how do you know that's real? I mean, previously, once upon a time, you had to get on a boat, plane, or train and travel to that remote corner of the world to say, wow, I've been to this cave painting in Algeria. And indeed, this is a cave painting in Algeria. It's prehistory. But now in this digital age, how can we know it's real? How can we know it's truthful? How can we know its provenance or its pedigree to say, well, is this real or has this been altered, edited, or changed? And quite honestly, I did alter, edit, and change this source image. So some of you might be able to spot it right away. Some of you might be like, oh, okay, I'm not seeing where the change could be. We'll reveal that in a little bit. But AI, of course, is the newest iteration of storytelling, just like social media, which came from streaming media, which came from television/radio, which came from photography, which came from the printing press, which came from scrolls, which came from the sage on the hill, where people gather around the sage on the hill and listen to oral history. And so being that every one of those iterative steps has kind of had this sort of, I don't trust it. Oh, is it real? Is it artificial? We've all kind of experienced some aspect of this timeline. And for me, I've been using these tools quite honestly since 1994 when Photoshop came out with layers. And as these tools have evolved, we've been doing artificial intelligence in Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign for like the last 10 years. It was just called Sensei. But the newest variant is called Firefly. That's Adobe's generative AI engine. It was trained on Adobe stock. Like all artificial intelligence, is it can't just make something unless it has a frame of reference. So this AI was trained on Adobe stock. And the nice thing about it is that means it's commercially viable and safe, because Firefly has no concept of what branded or trademarked content is. The example I usually use is Spider-Man swinging through a Manhattan City street. Let's say you put in that text prompt and you try to tell Firefly, can you please show me a picture of Spider-Man swinging through Manhattan City streets? You're not going to get Marvel Comics branded Spidey red and blue because that's trademarked. You're going to get some dude with creepy legs coming out of his back like Spider-Man. So at least from that standpoint, you got to frame your prompt to match the story you're trying to tell. But I want y'all to feel confident that when creating content with Adobe Firefly, it is safe. You won't be held accountable because our solution does not go scrape the web for assets when you put in a descriptive element into that prompt. And as a creative, long-term creative, I find that it really takes away from that fear of an empty artboard or file new syndrome, where you stare at a white square and like, oh, good Lord, what do I do now? Well, that's where elements like prompts and AI can step in. But great power, great responsibility to continue the Spider-Man theme. We want to ensure that if there is a fakery that has occurred, and that's the fakery that I did on that cave painting in prehistory, that did not exist until that red circle, until I put it inside my tools. We want to be able to at least set the bar to say, you know what, I did make this image, and I'm going to use something called content credentials to mark or watermark, really, this asset to say, hey, I made this on this day and this time using these pieces of software and AI too. And that's what this Content Authenticity Initiative, CAI, is. It's Adobe was a founding member of this gathering back in 2019 with two other Plank members, then Twitter, now X, and New York Times. Because 5 years ago, we saw the wave was coming. The AI wave of creativity was coming. So what we did is through this gathering, and we're now up to 2,000 global members, in which we are all kind of pledging and saying, you know what, it really is a good idea to ensure that the content that is created in digital tools has some form of metadata, or watermarking is too crude. Metadata is really the answer. And that's where the content credentials comes in. That would be this little CR that'll hang out at the top of any image that makes it out onto social media in order to say, yep, this was made on this date and this time using these tools by me. Also meaning, if I create a piece of content, brand it with metadata, and then put it out into the web and somebody downloads it and tries to deep fake it and repost, I can say, well, no, I'm sorry, that's not the original image. I have the original image and I can prove it. An open source C2PA metadata tag has been applied to this asset. That's the best thing about it is open source. So you can really trust that nobody has kind of a stake in ensuring its viability or its longevity. All 2,000 members of CAI agree that, yeah, let's get something out there so we can start branding our content. And it works pretty much like this. I just hover over an asset, and I can see that asset was created with a tool, in this case, Firefly Engine 1.0, or this one, talking about it was made by this individual, it's been pushed to these social platforms, this app was involved, and Firefly is used as well. So this is kind of the behind the scenes where if I take a piece of content, it's branded, and then I can continue to adapt and change this piece of art, ultimately taking me to, I had the source image, I had another image, and I merged the two on these days and these times. So a long preamble, but I just want to kind of set the stage. Adobe takes this very, very seriously because, to be quite honest, some of the stuff that's coming from video that we will not release this year, and probably guess why, it's an election year. So we want to ensure that nobody is considering that what they're seeing on the screen hasn't been artificially produced. So we want to ensure that the right kind of metadata tags are present in the file, and it'll just utterly blow you away the kind of stuff that you'll be able to do with video and how artificial intelligence can help storytell and create new and expanding visions for your work. A long lead in, but I really just wanted to set that stage. But you know what? Let's get to it. In fact, I'm just going to copy and paste this into the chat so y'all can see it a little bit later. There's some nice links in there. Let us talk about using Firefly. What we're seeing right now, that is a artificially generated meadow. This is a meadow at sunset golden hour with fireflies and mountain plants. Firefly made that for me. I fed it a prompt. And prompt engineering is, quite honestly, I feel like it should be like a minor in college because there are a lot of different AI engines out there. So you have to be able to know how to talk to the AI to get a good response back from the AI. Like when I click on this image, hang on one more time, a beautiful log cabin in the mountains with snow-capped peaks. I get 4 variations of that. Or if I scroll down and do this one, ultra-realistic image of an otter running at high speed with city buildings in the background on a sunny day with shallow depth of field and motion blur. Put that on a t-shirt. But the more you feed the prompt, the better Firefly is at interpreting, oh, I know what you want. Because if you're not specific, you're not going to get a specific visual. Like when I say the word dog on a bench, you probably all see a different dog. Because I didn't say what color is the dog, what size is the dog, boy, girl, is it on a bench, wood, stone, steel, metal, plastic, and where has this bench happened to be in what part of the world? But when you get a little bit more specific about what you tell your prompts, Firefly reacts and can generate images accordingly. And specificity is important because college student playing football in a crowded stadium, there is a global perception, and I agree, there's 2 different footballs. That is football for the rest of the world, but if I put in American football, that's how it knows to swap in the pigskin. So specificity is important, and kind of as a hint, that's a text file. This is where I put all of my text prompts. So if I'm working on a piece of AI content to tell a story, I try to copy and paste into this text prompt holder so I have a reference file. Because you can never tell or never remember what string of words did I use the last time I made something really cool to make some kind of cool outcome. But if you now have it in a text file, I can copy paste and change that from an otter to an elephant to a cheetah, a mysterious rundown French colonial 3-story hotel on the banks of a tropical river. Well, maybe it's not a tropical river, maybe it's a 1-story hotel in a downtown urban river. You know, changing the words changes the outcomes. So I'm a big fan of at least having a TXT file hanging out in which I can do this stuff. So let's check it out. Let's see how I can use Firefly, which you all have access to, firefly.adobe.com. You'd log in with your same credential that you would log in with the rest of your Adobe world. And then you would come to this panel and you would put in your prompt. But what if prompt writing is new to you? Well, I'm going to go to the Gallery tab right at the top of the firefly.adobe.com page. And these are assets that have been made by the global community, and they submitted it to Adobe. Adobe's like, oh, that's cool. Let's gather these. So all I have to do is hover over it, and I can see what it took to make that visual outcome. So Gray Wolf Digital Smoke Art, I bet there's more behind the scenes on that, and I can get into that with greater detail, but hearts, illustrations, I'm just hovering over this. And this is where you can start to build your own TXT library of really cool phrases that you can cut, copy, and paste, alter, and change to make your vision or as a means of helping to tell your story. So if you want to see what it actually looks like, all you do is you click on it. And now I'm taken into this piece of content. Hey, check out the top right-hand corner. Content credentials. This was made on September 18th. At apparently 6:16 p.m. So that's what the CR is actually going to look like when this ends up becoming a permanent aspect to our tools and resources. But there's the text file, and you can see that there are varying enhancements that are provided by Firefly to help you get to the image you want. And that's under the effects aspect, where I can click on all, and I can see all the different effects that all I have to do is just one click. Like, let's say I do film noir. That's added as a fourth effect. And now if I say try prompt, in theory, I should now get grayscale of this room. Because they talk about white sofa, Kobe, round pillows, but let's see what film noir did for it. Check out the lighting. Very different. Very film noir. But it's just that little bitty enhancement that helps tell my story differently. And it's the subtle stuff that always wins when you're working with AI. Little bits, little changes that'll get you to a more unique and less, oh, that was made by a machine. No, it looks like somebody was actually in this room taking this picture. And if you don't know it, some of you might get the IKEA catalog comes to the house. That's 95% generated in this fashion that you're seeing right here. There's no actual live photography of any IKEA content found in the IKEA catalog that is mailed around the world. It's all 3D models. Now it's 3D models enhanced with generative AI to set scenes and tell stories. Because now I can tell a story about this living room that I'm looking at. So Firefly, very cool. I can put in a phrase. I'm going to copy off screen and paste on the page. So it's college students with backpacks hiking up a gradual trail cut through the woods heading to a mountain peak. I can do all sorts of stuff to this. Now, of course, the first run through is sort of telling the tale. I can look at the aspect ratio of how big or how small I want this to be, whether I want it to be square, landscape, portrait, or widescreen. I can also look at adding different aspects of composition. So if I wanted to use another piece of art to help enhance AI's Firefly's ability of interpreting that text, I can do so. So you might have in decorating your home, your apartment, has said, oh, can you paint this wall blue? But can it be the blue that I found in this Van Gogh poster over here? Or can you paint this wall kind of this burnt umber that's really cool from this picture I took when I was out at Taos, New Mexico? Verbally, we're trying to describe to the technician, the artist, I want this look and feel, but oh, here's a reference photo just so you have a better sense of what I want you to create. That is exactly how we can steer our results inside Firefly. Styles is another aspect. So let's say I'm going to put in a prompt that I like to use a lot for, where is it? It's off camera. There it is. I'm going to copy this in. This is an example I use when I'm working with faculty about getting used to using AI and making a promotional poster that they can use to advertise one of their classes. So chemistry lab view from the tabletop drawn in line art with Art Deco style. I love Art Deco. I just kind of like the look and feel of it. Now, great, I did say line art, and chemists are holding glass tubes and beaker cups, but what if? What if I told Firefly, I've got this really cool visual in my head of Art Deco travel posters. I like those too. So use this text description, but please recreate the visual asset using this visual asset as a style guide. So I'm going to come into my folder, I'm going to come into my images, I'm going to look at my inspiration. So these are images. Where did I get these images from? Adobe Stock. You all have access to Adobe Stock. So if you wish to try this technique, think about what you want Firefly to create. Again, in this case, my big visual cue is Art Deco. So I went to Adobe Stock, did a search on Art Deco, and I downloaded some images. These images, I'm going to tell Firefly, ooh, I like this one. I want to use this look and feel to frame the text instructions that I have provided in here through the prompt. And I want it to be a poster, so let's go portrait. And I want it to be an illustration. So I'm just going to respin the wheel of creativity. And now I'm going to have it generate a new image, but being framed by a piece of visual content. And of course, being a live demonstration, and there we go, takes a certain amount of time, but massively different story now than when we first started on this journey. I could take any one of these images and generate similar images. If I like the look and feel, I can hit generate similar. I can use it as a composition or style reference. Say, I made this piece of content with a style powered by a piece of Adobe stock, and that generated this image. Awesome. I want to create another series of images for other classes, and I want to use this image as a style reference, just like the first image that I pulled from stock. So you can keep building, creating, and inspiring and creating and inspiring as you kind of get further and further into making visual assets inside Adobe Firefly. I can even punch it right down into Express. Go into my session in the next half hour. We'll be talking a little bit more about this, how we can use Express in a more creative visual and aspect. And then all I have to do is just download this asset, and now I have an actual tangible that I can do more. Add text, add shapes, create a piece of social content. So what we just saw right here, text prompts and styles, that's woven into a whole bunch of other Adobe applications. In this case, we're going to take a trip into Photoshop. Right now, I've got an image open that is not behaving. There we go. These are my two colleagues. It's a picture of us at a team dinner out at a restaurant. We were met out at our Lehigh, Utah office. Okay, cool. Two guys having fun in a restaurant. Where's the fake? What got added? There is no drink with a toy shark in it for my buddy Dan in his blue lemonade. And Jim's not a big fan of sushi. So that's generated by AI as well. This is the source image that I took with my phone about 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago. But then I just added some subtlety to it to say, oh, I think that'd be kind of cool if Dan had a floating toy shark in his drink. And I know Jim doesn't like it, but I got to put some sushi on his plate. Why? It helps tell a better story. How did I do this? In Photoshop, if you want to add something to an image, all you do is you make a selection around the image. There's lots of ways of doing it. It's a very crude selection. There, right there. That little shape that I just made, these little marching ants, that's the region of space where I want, through hitting generative fill, toy shark to appear. Then I generate it. It's going to spin me up 3 different variants. And these variants I can delete. These variants I can riff off of. So there's some more beverage coolness. Ah, that's kind of neat. I like that one too. See? Simple. I didn't have to do anything complex. I didn't have to bust out massive layer collections. I didn't have to worry about any kind of Photoshop trickery. I just use a selection tool. So if I wanted a portrait to be hanging on the wall, I just make a picture, a region of space, a selection, and then I feed the generative text. What do I want to have appear there? Very easy. Here's another example. Let's talk about, again, altering reality. If anybody's ever been to southern coast of Maine, this is Nubble Lighthouse in the town of York. Typical New England lighthouse, but rocky cliffs, got some sheep, it's fall, but you know what? That's not the real lighthouse. That's the real lighthouse. How did I get Firefly to do this for me? I made a selection around the area of space that I wanted something new to appear. And then I said, white lighthouse. Now I'm kind of breaking my own rules, aren't I? I made a big deal about saying dog on a bench, feed it the parameters. Well, quite honestly, there are only so many different ways you can portray a lighthouse. But if you go light on the description, it'll pull the colors and the visual feel from the asset itself. So I'm not going to get some weird candy striped lighthouse like you might see at other coastal parts of the country. It's going to pull the colors and the visual materials from the image itself. So that's why it's pure white brick with heavy black wrought iron as opposed to gold or other colors. Doesn't take much to do this. You just make a selection around the area of space, and yet there's no sheep on that island either. It's a pretty small island. But again, how did I do that? I made a marquee selection, and then all I did was I told it flock of white sheep. So by playing with it's kind of art versus science with the prompts, but I like to say if you lean back in your chair and you close your eyes and you visualize your image, give me 10 words, give me 20 words of what you're seeing. Put that in the prompt and keep altering and changing the look and feel. Here's another one. Gentleman's taking a picture, a selfie, and nice shirt, but maybe it's this shirt. Or maybe it's this shirt. Look at the prompt that I put in. Brightly colored linen plaid button-down shirt. I got 3 variations of that. Well, maybe I wanted denim, button-down denim shirt. Now, it didn't really jump on the rhinestones, unfortunately, because I did put that in the prompt. I didn't really want to hit that too hard, but as you can see, it doesn't take much to get a new garment on this particular fellow because this is the original. Like, well, I need a little bit more color in this image. So, color. Make a selection, give it a description, spin the wheel of creativity. There's another one. When I was on campus at the University of Delaware, they have this wonderful 8-foot wide granite sculpture of a book. And this other equally wonderful, I think that's copper or bronze, quill, 8-foot tall, 9-foot tall quill sitting next to it. You know, surrounded by nice brick trees, reflecting pool, but yeah, there's no reflecting pool. It's just more stone underneath. But what did I do? I made a selection around the area of space where I wanted that reflecting pool to be using my select tools. And then I gave it instructions. Didn't take much. Again, breaking my own rules, but reflecting pool. Now, could I put in reflecting pool with black lava smooth stones at the surface of a copper basin? Yeah. I was trying to see, you know, how low can I go word count wise in pushing the prompt. But again, I'm now telling a different story with this particular. And you can look, it did the reflections. You know, put those different trees in there. So Photoshop, very easy to change the world in front of you. But you don't have to be a hardcore Photoshop artist to do this. In fact, here's my favorite. This is the one I want to conclude with. Um, Truly, there are no more bad pictures that can be taken by anybody. It's another photo. It's vertical in orientation. Happy gray squirrel, but sorry, Bob Ross, that happy gray squirrel was AI generated. And honestly, there was a person in this picture as well that I wanted to remove. So if you want to eliminate content from a picture, again, the old trick is make a selection around the area of space that you want to change. But in this case, I'm not going to give the generative fill any instructions at all. I'm going to leave it blank because I don't have to put in forest floor with fallen leaves and green plants, just like I did for the lighthouse. If I give it no instructions, it's going to think, oh, you want me to fill that area with the colors and content that are present in this photo already. So this approach is another great way of saying, I truly want to change the world around me, and I can pick and choose how I want this story to be told. Because for me, I like this story without the hiker, because I'm able to say you're in the woods and Maybe it's a philosophical journey. Maybe it's an engineering discussion. Because as I've spoken to students, this is not exclusively for the paint on the jeans crowd. I feel like I can say that. I didn't go to one art school. I went to two, too. Didn't learn my lesson. But everybody can be creative. This might be a great limbic opening for a discussion that they might provide in class on decision-making protocols or paradigms. Building on that, what if I needed to be wider because I wanted it to be the background of a PowerPoint deck or some other type of widescreen presentation? Well, all I do is I switch to another tool in Photoshop, the crop tool, and I extend out the region of space that I want this image to now occupy. And I tell my generate button, not going to give it any instructions. When you don't give it instructions, it looks at the picture and it seeks to fill in that space with other content as found in that picture. And boom, I now have a wonderful forest illustration with different types of trees. Truly, it's a look away and look back and like, oh, cool. Widescreen shot of being out in the woods. It didn't add palm trees. It didn't add uh, aspen trees, or it used the trees it found in the piece. So I love these aspects of these programs about how it can truly change the world around you and allow you to be a better storyteller without a lot of strain. Because if I tried to do this with classic Photoshop techniques, I'd have to try to, in Adobe stock, find a similar asset of a similar lighting, time of day, time of year, color contrast, and then cut, paste, fade, blur, all of that together, which I used to have to do as a former Photoshop artist, but now I just stretch the picture and I get what I need. So really, there are no more bad pictures I feel that can be taken place. Any image can be very useful for telling a story. Building on this, Photoshop tends to be the first stop in any Adobe experience for most of the people out in the world. You know, whether it's Acrobat or whether it's Photoshop. Photoshop from a visual standpoint, that's the landing. But what about other applications? What about Illustrator? Remember this? I'm going to drag this out again. It was college students, right? College students with backpacks hiking up to a gradual trail cut through the woods. Well, there's the Illustrator version of that story. Because Illustrator now has the power of prompting and AI asset creation. And that's what I did there. College students with backpacks hiking up a gradual trail cut through the woods. And it gave me three versions. There's that version, and there's that version. Illustrator can be exceptionally intimidating for people that have not yet stepped into the world of vector art. So this is a wonderful introduction to it because now any one of these elements can be selected, altered, and changed. Meaning if I can pick it, I can change properties of it, namely color. Or maybe I can find other colors in this presentation and then uniformly change them to be something else. Specifically, Illustrator gives me the ability to not just generate a scene, but maybe a subject, or even maybe an icon. Now, why is this important? If you ever want to make stickers, this is the tool you want to use by putting in that phrase and then changing it to be subject. Look at the rollover, generate a vector graphic without a background. That's a sticker. Or icon. Maybe I wanted to do some kind of hiking company for a business class I'm taking. And I wanted to show some kind of Shark Tank-esque, I am an entrepreneur, I'm making a new backpack, and I want to show this backpack out in the world because like most logos, there's supposed to be some kind of aspect of the product they sell affiliated with the logo. Why not have this kind of scene and then try to generate an iconic variation of that scene? Perfect embodiment of a logo. So Photoshop can make pictures which help a story, but truly Illustrator can get very specific on, do I want an icon? Do I want an aspect of a story? Do I want the complete story? So it's a very powerful use of AI, hardwired into Illustrator, no additional cost. It's there, ready to be used. And of course, this detail slider controls how intense an adaptation of these words will Illustrator do for you. Now, it also provides the style reference, just like we saw earlier with that Art Deco orange image. I can do the exact same thing over here in the world of vector creation by saying, give me a visual image like an illustration or an artist. Now, you gotta be careful about that because artists typically have foundations and they're probably not going to want to see their art being used in an AI project. So again, go hunting in Adobe stock. You have it, you own it. It's royalty free. Great place to look for inspiration to help enhance your visual storytelling. Now, not just creating images, although I do like this one. Cosmic surfer in a spacesuit riding the waves of stars and mist with the galaxy spiral in the background. That's just a fun story. You know, I want to buy a van and paint this on the side of that van. But that's another use of a prompt. I couldn't even begin to, me as a creative artist, I couldn't even begin to figure out how the heck am I going to draw this? Or how am I going to illustrate this? Or what kind of asset can I use as a framework to tell this story? Hey, my human hand is controlling the AI and it generated this for me. Wonderful. Kind of the apex of this at this point in time, that is a very childlike scrawl of a car, a three-quarter profile scrawl of a car. And like, can I get Illustrator to turn that, which is kind of like using a style image. But I was like, you know what? Can this scribble be turned into actual content? Yes, it can. Because that asset was transformed through the Gen Shape Fill icon at the bottom of the page, and it generated this, or this, or this, or any number of other sketches. So yet another way of telling a story. Maybe you're taking a film class and you try to do some kind of rough storyboarding, pre-visualization. Got some easy ways of drawing that where you can block out a stage or a scene and create content. So Illustrator joins the club of being able to take prompts and create content which you can use to tell wonderful stories. Take it even a further step. I mentioned video. Well, welcome to Premiere. Premiere is benefiting from artificial intelligence. There's some stuff that's coming out again that will truly be epic, but I'm going to show you at least a very attainable for the non-editor crowd. Because again, Premiere could be a very intimidating application if you never used it. In this case, I want to show you how I can use some of my workspaces to get a piece of footage and have the footage be auto-transcribed. And then I'll select the dialogue, and through that dialogue selection, drop that piece of footage onto the timeline. It's another way of editing. How can I do this? Well, for my import tab, it's over here in the top right-hand side. Just turn it on, automatic transcription. And it handles multiple world languages too. So it doesn't really matter if the footage is or is not in English. Great. We support a number of global languages that can handle this process. So I've imported my footage. I've got some footage of an athlete and another footage of this athlete. So it's one of those half profile, full profile shots. I want to kind of bounce back and forth between the half profile and full profile. You can see that the transcription of that content just automatically appeared. I didn't have to farm it out. I didn't have to do anything special. I just told it on import, please auto transcribe, which it did. So now, how do I get content from this piece into the timeline? I don't have to play clip salad or cut, chop, and slice. I select a piece of content by just selecting it like this, and I click one button. Boom. And just like that, I'm off and editing. Now I can switch back and forth between full profile and half profile. And I scroll up to the timeline. So this is what I just selected earlier. I wanted to be a soccer star, which thankfully for both of us I did. Drop that in. And then track became a serious sport for me. I was going to college for it. Can drop that in. And I'm going to bounce back to the full profile to complete this thought. And I'll do a little bit more adaptation for you. And I can drop that in. Now, I'm going to double click on my sequence. I now see the timeline and the dialogue exclusively for the footage I just added. Well, what's the big deal about that? I can now continue to edit my footage by saying, well, I don't want to hear the interviewer ask, can you tell us how long you've been doing this? I'm just going to highlight it. And notice what it did. It made a very specific selection in my timeline saying, oh, I found that piece of footage. And that's what I'm going to do, hit delete. And just like that, the split compresses as if I made a razor cut, and I'm able to tell a better story, a more effective story, because now I'm editing via dialogue, as opposed to the traditional method of editing via looking at visual information. You're going to need to pick your battles on this because not all footage is dialogue driven, right? Some footage is actually very much visually driven. But consider all the interview footage that you might have had to sit through or look for a pull quote. Now, because I have text, I can do a Command F and search for a particular word or phrase. And in a 40-minute interview, I can, through a text prompt, through a text search, jump right to that section of footage that I need, isolate it, select it, render it, push it out to social as a social media quote, helping me tell better stories. So now when I roll this back, I'm hoping the audio works. I did turn it on in Teams.
Hi, my name's generative. I am a sprinter. I've been sprinting for more than half my life, so about 11 years now. I wanted to be a...
Now, hopefully the audio did come through, and if it didn't, you can see that there's a very significant pause on this second block of copy. So you know what? That's like almost a half-second pause. I'm going to delete that. Come on, delete. There. So now when I roll it back and I play it,
I am a sprinter. I've been sprinting for more...
There's two pauses. So I'm going to do the pause at the end of the first statement, delete that, and now I'll roll the footage again.
I am a sprinter. I've been sprinting for more than half my life, so about 11 years now.
And just like that, I'm very easily selecting and choosing and editing and knitting together a more effective story without having to spend hours on learning how to ripple or roll or different types of edits or cuts. Input the footage, turn on auto transcript, choose the piece of footage, select what you want, and then just hit one button and it drops it right in the timeline. Artificial intelligence, but not necessarily for image generation, artificial intelligence from dialogue comprehension. Keep building on that. I'm going to come back into Express, not Express, beg your pardon. It's another application that we have. It's called Podcast. Podcast.adobe.com. Again, something you all have access to. Put in your credentials, just like any other Adobe application. And now I can say, I want to go to the studio. So just as we had imported a piece of video footage into Premiere, I can upload audio footage into Podcast. And like this is the video that we just saw. But I didn't have to upload a pure audio file. I uploaded the MP4 file, the straight up video file. But it ripped out the video and it kept the audio. So now I can have an audio pull quote if I wanted to add that into another application, into another audio utility or resource. So Adobe Audition is our frontline application for audio engineering. It's a fantastic tool, but it is an engineering tool. I want to create. Now that's kind of me picking splitting hairs over creative tool versus editing slash engineering tool. If I want to do buses and effects and multi-track editing, Audition is the tool, 100%. But if I want to listen to a piece of audio and delete the ums and the ahs, or if I wanted to do a file find or a text find to jump or fast forward through an audio interview, I can do that right here. So now when I play it,
I am a sprinter, and I realized that I was a big fish in a pond with even bigger fish.
so hopefully the audio is coming through on your side, but it's doing following the bouncing ball so that as the audio plays, you can see what word it's on. Now, just like we did in Premiere, I can select content and either just hardcore delete it, or I want to cut it. And I want to come back
And I realized that I was a...
and I want to paste it. So now, just like the actual original footage says, my name is Jeremy Wu, I'm a sprinter, I've been sprinting for half my life, I can cut, copy, and paste text like I'm editing an email and edit audio content without looking at all those peaks and valleys of waveforms. So another wonderful tool that'll help me tell a much better story with a whole lot less grief and strife by allowing me to just pick what I need. And of course, I can download this as a TXT file for a transcript and an audio file for the actual audio output. And there's even a filter that will allow me to correct for loud noises, ambient noises, creaks, or fans, or electrical motors, or engines. This enhanced speech will let me, let's say you're recording a piece of audio and there's some landscaping going on outside, and you hear that repetitive buzz and whir of the blades or the little weed whips. By turning on enhanced speech, it'll seek that out and eliminate it and just cut to my pure voice as opposed to the voice that was being actually recorded at that time. So the benefit is I can truly record with my device, right? I can just drop my phone on the table and just hit the native audio recording application. And I can record 30, 40 minutes worth of content, upload that audio file into podcast, and rip out and strip out the stuff that I do and I don't need. So another way of at least being able to more effectively tell a story, I can get to my content that I truly need quicker and faster because podcasting lets me read the content found in normally it would be me with the headphones on, just scrolling and scrolling and like, when am I going to get to that piece of content that I heard them say? Auto transcribes it in podcast. Find it, isolate it, and download it. Wonderful tool and utility podcast. Kind of rounding out this aspect of storytelling ability. So I want to make a quick look inside Express, and I'll um, turn it back over to Barrett for wrapping things up. Express equally has generative AI. So I come back into Express. We have this dedicated section called "What do I want to make inside Express?" And if you have not heard of Express, it's a browser-based creative application. Again, express.adobe.com. You all have access to it. You all put in the same credential that you would in any other Adobe application. Generate image. We just saw that in Firefly, Photoshop, Illustrator. Well, it's right here in Express as well. Insert object. If I wanted to put a bow on that cat, just like I added objects inside Photoshop. In this case, I'm not drawing a selection. I'm kind of painting in a crude selection. Same with these hot air balloons on this image that I'm parking my mouse on. Express will do that too. Generate template. I just want to do a quick version of that, and then we can wrap it up. What I like about generate template is it allows me to give a text description of what I want Express to visually create for me, because maybe I'm not so confident in my ability of picking a typeface or doing an arrangement of text and image and color and shape. Well, by generating a template, I fed it a prompt, and now it's going to create that still image for me. which I can then continue to edit inside Express. And there we go. Just like that, I now have a poster that I would usually be like looking at an empty white square. When I say file new, I'm like, oh, geez, how am I going to tell this story? Well, I fed a prompt to Express, just like we fed a prompt to Firefly in Photoshop and Illustrator. And now I can look at all the varying elements that are created for me and make changes. So if I don't like this gray, maybe I want to change it to a brand color, like maybe your brand. I can come in and choose any one of brands that I've already pre-made. In this case, I made this earlier today, and I'm starting the process of getting this on brand very easily because I already have these brand elements already gathered. So I didn't have to really sweat over, well, where am I going to find? I pre-made these branding elements, and that will help me make a better story. Now, naturally, it's lagging on me because I didn't have to refresh. The last point I would show, it even generated an image for me. I didn't feed that prompt in. Express made a prompt for me based off my initial ask of college students playing games in the library. So I can continue to edit the AI by adapting this text, which made this image. So AI is thoroughly enmeshed in Adobe applications. There's more wonderful stuff coming down the pipe, but hopefully this gives you a sense of how you can get that image out of your head with a prompt or simple dialogue to better tell your story, whether it's an audio or video, still images, posters, social media, what have you. We got you covered.